Thank you very much for staying with us. Tonight we're discussing debt overhang and amid dwindling revenue. And I still have with me the Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Asset Management Limited, Johnson Chukwu. All right, Mr. Chukwu, now, how can Nigeria attract foreign direct investment to stimulate economic growth and reduce debt burden?
Well, to attract foreign direct investment, because you're talking about attracting long-term capital from other jurisdictions, you need to improve on your ease of doing business. You need to improve on your competitiveness. Some of them issues you need to address, I've mentioned. But let me emphasize some of the areas that are scaring away investors. One of them is, in fact, insecurity in the country. I can imagine how many people want to go and invest in Sudan today. And that's how some people perceive some parts of the country where there is so much insecurity. So we need to address the issue of insecurity around the country. Two, we need to address our monetary policy management. One of these is the issue of FX policies. We have the multiplicity of foreign exchange means that if somebody who is coming into your country and has to come through the official window will get a value below what the person will consider as the open market value of the dollar he's bringing in. And then when they want to take out the money, they have to go through CBN, file their capital importation receipt and all those things. And these are not what investors want to. Investors want to be able to access their funding without going through some regulatory approvals or regulatory challenges. So you need to address the issue of foreign exchange management in the country. And then you have to address the issue of logistics supply. So if people who are investing in your country, maybe they want to produce for export, and then the export terminals must be available and must be efficient. Logistics supply includes the import terminal, the seaports. They want to bring in their raw materials, they want to bring in their finished goods, they want to bring in their equipment, and then they don't want to get stuck at the ports. So these are some of the things that are scary. And then you deal with the issues around the quality of labor. We have a large pool of young, able-bodied men and women, but in terms of the quality of labor, we are not top of the market. So you need to look at your educational system, the educational curriculum, emphasize those skills that employers of labor are seeking for, and make sure that people who are graduating from school have those quality or skills right from school. So these are some of the issues that you need to address to attract investors into your local market.
All right, so you've mentioned about 4 or 5 challenges here, but let me pick a multiplicity of foreign exchange. How do you think the incoming administration should tackle this?
I think when it comes to issue of foreign exchange, 2 things they need to do. One of which is that they must harmonize the exchange rate. It is not rocket science to harmonize the exchange rate. And I think to harmonize the exchange rate, you need to get a midpoint and ensure that you have a clearing rate that will attend to anybody who wants to access FX in the market. And then you work towards ensuring you have some stability in that exchange rate. A situation where official rate is about 462 or 465, and then the private market is about 770, does not all go well for investors to come into their market.
So, there is a warning from the IMF, which sounds like a caution to the federal government to adjust to a shrinking global economy. As an expert, is this warning good for us? And if it is, how do you think the incoming government should go about this? Mr. Chukwu, can you hear me? All right, tonight I've been speaking with the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Asset Management Limited, Johnson Chukwu, and we've, to a large extent discussed on debt overhang amid dwindling revenue. All right, so if you can hear me now, there is a warning from the IMF, which sounds like a caution to the federal government. And because we have a new administration coming in, it says a caution on the federal government to adjust to a shrinking global economy. If this warning is good for us, how do you think the incoming administration should go about it?
What I think the incoming administration should do is to focus on what will attract investors into the country. Of course, the economy, the global economy is shrinking. The geopolitical tension in Eastern Europe has led some level of restrictions on trade. And we've seen the rise in nationalism across the globe. But the key thing is that there are still countries that have become the haven for investors, and that's, for me, should be what the government should focus on. We have some huge competitive advantages. We have a huge local market, over 200 million population. We have a prospective, strong labor market because of the demography of our population. And then we also have a largely liberalized labor market. So we should explore those things, and ensure that even as global trade is shrinking, that we still remain one of the best destinations for investors to come to.
So let's talk about corruption, which continues to bedevil economic development. Past governments have promised to deal with this, but it remains a menace. How do you think this can be done, or what can be done to tackle this menace?
You know, the thing about corruption is that you have to lead to fight. The fight against corruption must be led from the front. So the president must be the one leading the fight against corruption. And I think once you do that, it's where you say you must walk your talk. The president must walk his talk as it comes to fighting corruption. The populace must see the president as not corrupt, for them to be able to, also the president to have the moral authority to enforce laws and order in the country. So I think corruption issue around the country has to do with who is leading the fight against corruption and what strategies they have adopted. And my approach is that to fight corruption in any country, you must focus on eliminating those incentives for people to engage in corrupt activities. That should be the priority number one. And I always use this as an example. Prior to the liberalization of the telecommunications sector, there were a lot of corruption tendencies built into the then old Nitel because it was a monopoly. So everybody had to go to Nitel to get a line, and then those who were involved in that were exploiting subscribers. I remember my line that they used to toss it every 2 weeks, and they will come and make claims on me and make me to part with some naira. But today, the telco operators are basically dashing out SIM card. They are begging you to make sure your line is on because that industry has been liberalized. And then you have multiplicity of suppliers or operators in that industry. So if to fight corruption, you must focus on policies that will eliminate corruption. Take another instances where you need to go to offices to seek for approval or get some approval from a government agency. And then you automate that process that you don't need to have a physical interface with the agency staff. So it becomes difficult for them to extort to you because they can't even see you. And you must put a process that once requests are made is timed. And when it gets to an approving authority, the time is spent with the approving authority is also timed. So if you have this level of automation, which technology has availed us, it will be difficult, or you can reasonably reduce corruption. And if you are not corrupt, it's difficult for people who work with you to also be corrupt because you have the moral authority to deal with any deviation.
So apart from loan servicing, fuel subsidy payments is another factor taking revenue away from government. How should this be handled to free up more funds for development?
My take is that subsidy payment clearly we're not getting the best value for money. They are figures being bandied around that we could spend about 3.3 trillion in the first half of this year, and if we allow subsidy to the last of this year, we spend about 6.5 trillion naira. And like I told you, total revenue generated by federal government as of November last year was 6.5 trillion naira. So if you spend 6.5 trillion on subsidy, then clearly you are going to borrow for every other expenditure of the government. So it's not sustainable. And then the fact that we buy petrol at a subsidized rate has not improved our standard of living. We are still one of the poorest countries in the world. We have 133 million people who are suffering from multidimensional poverty. And according to the Minister of Planning, he said that about 67 million people are suffering from financial poverty. So we really can't say we've enjoyed or gotten enduring benefit from subsidies. If that be the case, then it then means that if we can put that money elsewhere, probably we will improve the standard of living of Nigeria, we improve the quality of life in the country, and we'll probably make the country a more productive society.
So I'm sure you're aware that the outgoing government of Buhari is seeking a loan of $800 million from the World Bank to cushion the effects of subsidy removal. Is this necessary?
Well, the government's tenure is ending on Monday, the 29th. I'm aware that subsidy has not been removed as at now. So it then means that whatever palliative you want to give to cushion the impact of subsidy removal is not yet due. So even if they have assessed that fund, I think it should be put in an escrow account, pending when the subsidy is removed, and then the palliatives can now be disbursed to cushion the impact. You really can't be administering injection on a person who has not had a dislocation. It's only when that injury has occurred that you can administer, you can front load administration of relief when the cost of the relief has not yet occurred.
All right. Now, the president-elect has promised to remove subsidy upon inauguration. Do you see him changing his mind? If
he accepts so, then we hold him to his promise. But a couple of things has also happened. The way the election went, the current mood of the country actually put some challenges to anybody to take for some decisions that could have social impact, negative social impact. But taking out the subsidy is the right thing to do. Whether the political ramifications can be dealt with, given the current socio-political environment, the mood of the country, is a different thing. So, but it's good basically at the call of the president.
But organized labor has continued to discourage subsidy removal. How do we achieve unanimity on this particular issue?
You know, when we say this, I say organized labor is being they are being unreasonable, because I know that clearly they are fully abreast of the implications of the subsidy failure or the failure associated with subsidy payments. For instance, what's our labor force? What are the benefits of subsidy, even for the labor union? It would lead to a growth in job opportunities in the country, because if you take out subsidies, local refineries will come up, the petrochemical industry will come up, the paint industry will come up, and others byproducts that are byproducts of petroleum refineries that also serve as feedstock for other industries will be produced here. So we're going to domesticate crude refining. Those refineries will employ people, and the labor force will grow. So I don't think the labor unions are ignorant of the benefits of having a vibrant local petroleum industry, particularly the downstream petroleum industry developed in the country. We at some point we are producing all the fuel we are consuming here, but now we're importing all the fuel we're consuming today. And if somebody says that's the right way to go, I think the person is not it's not being honest to the society.
Yes, but organized labor says it is looking at the impacts that this removal will have on Nigerians. But what do you think labor does not understand exactly?
Well, I think labor, it's not that they don't understand. Like I said, I believe they are just being mischievous. Labor knows that for every bet you must go through pens, the delivery pens. And for every fundamental economic policy, you must have the negative implications. And some of the negative implications fizzle out or ease up over time. And let me also remind us, in case we have forgotten, when GSM came up, was introduced in the country, a SIM card was 150,000 naira, if you recall. A 150,000 naira then was more than, remember at that time, a dollar was about 118 naira to a dollar. And so it then means that a GSM line was more than $1,000 as at the time the GSM was introduced in the country in 2000 or so, or 2001. Today, how much is a SIM card? If you recall that our airtime was about 50 naira per minute when GSM was introduced. Today, what's the airtime, despite the depreciation of the local currency's value? So the reality is that if you go through those pains and you are ready to weather those pains, in the medium to long term, as a liberalized economic sector will create more value for consumers. And then competition will bring down prices. And when the price come down, the standard of living of citizens will improve. So we must realize that we have proof of concept of where private sector investment in a sector that used to be monopoly has brought improvement in the country, brought down the cost, despite the fact that our naira has depreciated over time.
So let's talk about the issue of subsidy. What measures can be put in place to ensure that the removal of fuel subsidy does not worsen inflation and economic instability?
Well, it may be impossible not to worsen inflation. Certainly, there will be a movement in inflation rate, but how we manage it is one thing. Government has talked about providing public transport, improving public transport system in the country, particularly intracity transport. That could go to some extent to ameliorate the impact of inflation on the citizens, and as well as the impact on transport costs. So, but you really can't run away from this. But I said, in the medium to long term, we're going to see competition bring down prices of petroleum products. And remember that we produce one of the sweetest crude in the world, what they call sweet crude, which is light crude, whose refining cost is lower. And it then means that a lot of people will scramble to set up the refineries, local refineries within the Nigerian customs zone. And as competition begins to rev up, prices will come down, and ultimately, even if transport costs have gone up, they will eventually moderate.
All right, so just a few days ago, the Dangote refinery was inaugurated. How do you think it will help in all this?
Well, I always tell people that Dangote refinery is a great investment by a Nigerian investor, but sometimes people think it's a silver bullet that will address all the ills of the downstream oil and gas sector. I do not think so. It will bring some relief. We're going to eliminate, at the minimum, the cost of freight, or reduce the cost of freight, not eliminate, reduce the cost of freight. Because remember that when any of the major oil marketers bring in products into the country with MR, with those large vessels, the price they sell it here will include the freight of the cost of transporting them from where they are refining, maybe Netherlands, to this country, and then they also insurance costs associated with those transport. Bringing those products to the country. So that will to some extent be reduced because a Dangote refinery does not need to pay freight to bring the refined product from Amsterdam to the country or any other country where it's currently being refined. So we're going to see some level of savings. But remember that Dangote refinery is going to buy crude at international market price. I pray that we'll be able to even produce enough crude to supply to the refinery so that they don't buy imported crude, which will increase their cost. So if we can produce local, if we are producing enough crude to supply to the refinery, and then so we're going to see some cost savings and cost efficiencies that ultimately, if monopoly impact does not come in, we should see some reduction in the cost of landed refined petroleum products in the country.
All right. The National Economic Council has targeted $2.5 billion revenue from non-oil sector. How feasible is this?
Well, for me, it's a work in progress. Some of the things that we've discussed here, if we begin to implement them, we're going to see growth in non-oil revenue in the country. Remember that the non-oil sectors account for more than 94%, but not more than 95% of Nigeria's GDP. So you know that those, in terms of value addition and quality of product that are produced here, we are not yet there. So when we begin to see improvement in value of or the quality of products produced, and they begin to compete with international market, internationally produced products, we should begin to see improvement in our foreign exchange earnings or earnings from non-oil exports. There are several things we're exporting the raw materials. We should be talking of beneficiation. But when you talk of beneficiation, that means you're talking of improving the value addition in those products. Then you must have the infrastructure that will allow for efficient production of goods and services. And that is what is missing. But like I said, it's work in progress. If we address some of the issues that we mentioned in this conversation, we should be a destination for production of quality goods. At least if it's not highly technical goods, but at least semi-technical goods that could be exported to other countries.
All right, so let me also ask you this, and this is about another critical challenge the incoming government would have to deal with. How can Nigeria address the issue of unemployment, particularly among its youth population?
The only way to address unemployment is to make the economy to be productive. We've talked about how to attract foreign direct investments, which will go into this sector productive activities, and those productive activities will employ youths. We talked about improving or restarting or reactivating our downstream sector, petroleum refining industry. Those will create employment. We talked about beneficiation, improving the quality, building intermediate goods at the minimum. Those will create employment. We talked about improving the quality of education, the curriculum of education. Today, the world is talking about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That will make our graduates more employable. If we address those things, we're going to create the opportunities for young, able-bodied men and women to be gainfully employed.
All right, so, we've said a lot, but the incoming administration would need a finance minister to coordinate this. What kind of person should that be?
Well, it's somebody who understands macroeconomic issues, who understands development economics, who understands the dynamics of the local environment, local economic environment. I think those are, if the person who has those attributes, and the person should be able to do the job. You understand the macro issue around, you understand macroeconomics, you understand development finance, development economics, and then you also have a good grasp of the dynamics of our own local economic and social environment.
All right, let me have your final message to the president-elect and how to go about, bringing up the fortune of this country, reviving the fortune of this country.
Well, I think the work to be done is huge. Anybody who is to govern Nigeria today must lead from the front. That, for me, is a defining factor. You must walk your talk. You must create you must be the example of what you want the society to be. You must epitomize the values that the country should drive. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I said, look, one of my friends who has just been elected governor, that on May 30th, he should be on his desk by 8 a.m. That if he does that, he will send a message to the public servants in that state to say, look, it is no longer business as usual. The governor comes to work by 8 a.m. and you cannot be rest assured within the next 3 days, everybody will come to work by 8 a.m. So the president will need to lead from the front in all aspects of Nigerian life. Issue about corruption, issue about providing leadership, issue about the work ethics, issue about the strategic focus of the country. And then it must be somebody who is, strategic focus is very critical. Sectorial focus is very critical. We must define what we want to do with agriculture. We want to define what we want to do with several sectors, solid minerals, where we have competitive advantage, and policies around those areas must be assiduously implemented.
All right, just before we go, the Vice President-elect is an economist. What role do you think he will play in all these?
I think the Constitution has made provision for the Vice President to be the head of the economic management team or something like that, and also coordinates engagement with the state government. I think they have another meeting they call something of states. So the deep knowledge of economy is very important, because the greatest challenge we have today is economic challenge. If we address the economic challenge, we're going to address the social challenges we have around in the country. So you need sound economic minds to begin to address the economic challenge the country has had. And then once we address that, if people are employed, insecurity will come down. A lot of the challenge we have today will begin to moderate.
So how confident are you about both of them to succeed economically? I'm talking about the President-elect and the Vice President-elect.
Well, I think you just asked the same question again, which you asked at the beginning of this engagement. And I said the taste of the pudding is the eating. We are waiting. You and I and all Nigerians will be waiting to see as events unfold. The key thing is that everybody in this country believes the country has gone through a wrong route, and we need to reverse the route, and we need to reverse the route quickly. So we are all hopeful that tomorrow will be better than today.
All right, thank you very much. I've been speaking with the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Asset Management Limited, Johnson Chukwu. Tonight we discussed debt overhang amid dwindling revenue in Nigeria. Mr. Chukwu, we appreciate your contribution every time. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
My pleasure.